Hey, it's NPR's Book of the Day. I'm Andrew Limbong. Dads, man, sometimes it's hard to get to know them, right? Justin Kaplan was a dad. He was also a famous Pulitzer Prize-winning biographer. And for his daughter, Hester Kaplan, those two identities never separated. And so, even though he was physically home all the time, making dinner, playing frisbee or whatever, his mind was always on his work, focused on the life of someone else. Hester Kaplan's new memoir is titled Twice Born, Finding My Father in the Margins of Biography. And she told Here and Now's Tiziana Deering that it was a way of finally getting to know her father through that work he was so focused on. That's coming up.
This message comes from Mint Mobile. This holiday season, stop overpaying for wireless and switch to Mint. Shop 50% off unlimited plans at mintmobile.com/switch. Limited time offer. Upfront payment of $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12 months. Taxes and fees extra. Initial plan term only. Above 35 gigabytes, network may slow when busy. Capable device required. Availability, speed, and coverage varies. See mintmobile.com.
I'm Tiziana Deering in Boston. It's Here and Now. Hester Kaplan grew up in Cambridge, Massachusetts, as the child of two writers, Pulitzer and National Book Award-winning biographer Justin Kaplan and novelist Anne Bernays. Raised at a kitchen table that featured luminaries from David McCullough to Annie Dillard and John Updike, she herself became a writer. But as she notes in her new memoir, throughout all the novels and short stories, one subject continued to elude her own father. That's the topic Hester Kaplan takes on in her new book, Twice Born, and she joins us in the studio to talk about it. Hester, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So you start the book. I mean, talk about a striking way to open a book, right? You are at your own father's cremation because you wanted to see him in that moment, despite the fact that many of your family members didn't want to be there. What were you looking for there and in writing this book?
I think that's a really interesting place to start because the idea for writing the book really happened at that moment when I was in the crematory. My father was a very private and hidden man, and one of the things that I'd always noticed, it was very hard for us to make eye contact. And of course, his eyes are not open in the casket, but I felt that this was a moment where we could be sort of stilled together.
There is this other aspect, and I didn't think of it till you said what you just said right there, because this lack of eye contact stayed with me through your book. You couldn't gaze at him.
Right.
And so in the room where he was cremated, you could gaze. And in the end, what you choose to do in this book is try to take a sustained look at a man that you could never look at.
And I hope that by the end of the book, through the journey of writing about him and discovering him and thinking about him, he was able to look at me and I was able to look at him. And one of the ways that we were able to connect with each other was through books and through other people's writing.
And not just any book. That's the other thing. It's more than a conceit or a device in your book, right? It is the way you get to know your father, right, which is through his first biography, by some accounts his most famous work about Mark Twain, Mr. Clemens and Mark Twain. Of course, he was Samuel Clemens and Mark Twain. It was fascinating to me that you had to read his work to get to know him. What made you think that his book on Mark Twain was the key that was going to allow you to unlock your own dad?
Well, I had never read any of his work until he died.
Okay, let's stop there. Okay. What and why?
I think it's very complicated for children of writers, and particularly the environment in which I grew up. The writer and the work were never really separate. I knew both of them. My parents were big entertainers, and they had a lot of literary luminaries come through all the time. And I would read their books, and I would see them
You read the luminaries' books.
Luminaries' books, and I would see them interact at cocktail parties and do sort of crazy things and try to make some connection between the work and the writer. So in my mind growing up, the work and the writer were never separate. So I think for my father's books, I always felt that he would be in that first biography, and it was where he didn't really want me to go and where I was also sort of afraid to go. I think I always had a feeling that where he was the most himself was when he was writing.
And your book, it's a little hard to describe this, but you do use the things that he writes about Mark Twain. You take moments in his biography of Mark Twain where it is clear that he is making specific choices about the way he's describing things, whether it's a little bit of Twain's inner life or his attitudes towards his spouse or other people, and you read in them a reflection of your own father. Did you ever feel like you were doing something unauthorized? Isn't the word? Did you ever worry you were making it up?
That's a good word.
Okay, well then let's stay there. Did you ever feel unauthorized?
I did. I was aware from the beginning as I started to read this book that I was looking to find these kind of convergences or parallels between my father's life and Twain's life, and to be very conscious of the decisions that he made in choosing how to write about Twain and how that might reflect on who he was. Because I think he was, as I said, he was a very private and hidden man, but he was enormously empathetic and, deeply psychological when it came to talking about Twain.
He was so removed from you. You've already talked about how writing was his private space, and you couldn't really separate the writer from the father. I think it's important for listeners to understand he worked from home from the beginning.
From the first book.
But his study, as you describe it in your work, is a sort of inner sanctum, and it is painful when you enter that inner sanctum. There are often repercussions.
The study, it's interesting that you mentioned the study because we grew up in this big house in Cambridge, and you came in the front door and the study was right there to the right. You couldn't get into the house without passing the study, and the door was always shut. And the sort of irony here is that he was much more present in a certain way than many of the fathers that I knew who would, leave the house at 8 and come back at 8. He cooked dinner at a time when, men didn't do a lot of cooking. He played Frisbee with us in the street, but he wasn't really there in terms of emotionally. He was very there physically and activity-wise, but as soon as it got sort of emotional, he would disappear into his study.
Do you think there's an entire generation of people out there listening right now who are nodding about their own dads with what you just said?
And that's been really interesting with this book because a lot of people have said to me, this is how I felt about my father, that he was sometimes there, he was not there, but that the emotional aspect or the sort of intimate connection with their father was not there. And, I hear people say, this was what sort of men were told to do or trained to do as fathers in that era. But
that strikes me, though, in reading the book as oversimplifying.
Yeah, I agree completely.
But as you give us breadcrumbs throughout the book, because that's the only way we get to know your dad, right? These chapters are a little bit of him, a little bit of Mark Twain, a little bit of you, a little of your mom or memories. We start to piece together a childhood that had enough loss and maybe enough trauma in it that it's not entirely shocking he might be public when it feels safe, but intensely private where it would be intimate to let himself be known.
And I think I didn't understand until I'd finished this book, until it was months after this book, how much I felt that grief ran through his life. He had lost both his parents by the time that he was 13 and went to college when he was 15 or just 16. And was brought up by his older brother and an aunt and then a housekeeper who had been with him before his parents died. And he never, ever talked about his parents, ever. But it was the thing I think that I was aware of from, the earliest age.
And I want to underscore that. When we say never, you found out by accident that you named your son after your own grandfather. You didn't even know.
I did not know. And that's sort of shocking to me on two levels. One is that I didn't know because I'd never heard him mention the name Tobias.
Yeah.
I didn't know that his father's name was Tobias because I'd never heard him talk about it. But secondly, when he heard, of course, that I was naming my child Tobias, he didn't say anything.
You said a minute ago that you learned that grief ran through his life. Did it run through yours?
I think it did. I think that another thing that I sort of discovered about grief in this book is that I think that my desire to connect with him all my life had to do with sort of alleviating his grief. which I felt had somehow fallen to me. And that by the end of this book, I feel that, I had relieved myself of some of this. And he has this beautiful line. He said that biography is an antidote to loneliness and a restorative of solitude. And it took me a while. I had to read that, 1,000 times to understand. But I think that, grief is a state, among other things, of great loneliness. And when you can write a biography, or when you can write a character, or when you can connect to somebody else, however you do it, it makes you feel less alone. And then you can sit in your solitude, which is a productive, more peaceful place than grief.
Hester Kaplan's book is Twice Born, Finding My Father in the Margins of Biography. Hester, thank you.
Thank you very much.
This message comes from Mint Mobile. Starting at $15 a month, make the switch at mintmobile.com/switch. $45 upfront payment for 3 months. 5 gigabyte plan equivalent to $15 a month. Taxes and fees extra. First 3 months only. See terms. This message comes from Jerry. Noticing your car insurance rate creep up even without tickets or claims? You're not alone. That's why there's Jerry. Jerry handles the legwork by comparing quotes side by side from over 50 top insurers, so you can confidently hit buy. No spam calls, no hidden fees. Jerry even tracks rates and alerts you when it's best to shop. Drivers who save with Jerry could save over $1,300 a year. Don't overpay. Download the Jerry app or visit jerry.ai/NPR today.
Support for this podcast and the following message come from the NPR Wine Club, which has generated over $1.75 million to support NPR programming. Whether buying a few bottles or joining the club, you can learn more at nprwineclub.org/podcast. Must be 21 or older to purchase.